The Atlantic slave trade from 1501 to the 1800s. In the 15th century, Europeans sailed out for Africa in search of gold and spices in exchange for textiles and, over time, slaves. They took men, women, and children to the Americas and received sugar, tobacco, and other goods in return. The ships had little space for so many slaves, and the European knew this, but still, the Africans were to go on the ships. The Africans were put into ships with little to eat or drink. Not only this, but they also had a little space to move. In fact, they had less than 4 feet of space. The Africans were to remain on the ships for months and months without fresh air or even a glimpse of sunlight. When the ships finally get to where they have to be, the enslaved Africans finally get to stretch their legs. If they are lucky, they get to feel the warmth of the sun before they have to go to work. On few ships, the Africans could go out and get just a bit of fresh air, but it wasn't long until the captain of the ship was telling them they had to go back to the darkness. Once the ships arrived to where they had to be, the African slaves were brought in the town square. They are separated from their families, and then, one by one, they are sold to the people. Signs and posters hung almost everywhere, asking for the selling of slaves for a high price. People would sell their old slaves and get a new one. Once the slaves were sold, they were brought to the fields or farms or plantations to work for hours and hours. Most would work from dawn to dusk in the fields, and some had to work inside of the house too. The marks of the shackles they wore on their wrists are still visible in their eyes, even after the marks have disappeared. The African slaves came from all over Africa. Unfortunately, most of these countries were conquered by European countries. There was no way the slaves could escape the Europeans and their power. Once the slaves came to America, they were in foreign grounds, where many people looked at them with eyes of not wonder nor rage, but hatred almost. Through constant attempts to escape the ships and through constant attempts to escape the fields and labor of the foreign lands, the African slaves would die trying. Towards the end of the 1700s and the beginning of the 1800s, the Atlantic slave trade was coming towards an end. The English were trying to end it in Europe by passing the Slave Trade Act in 1807. After they were freed and after they were reunited with their families, they will always look back at those horrid times and remember every harsh word that was said, every harsh look that was given, every second in the field, and every beating that was endured. Although people talked about freeing slaves and the slaves' rights, people still looked down upon the Africans, and they still thought less of them. At first, signs were posted about slaves being sold, and then signs were posted about the freedom of the slaves. The year of 1886 officially marked the end of the Atlantic slave trade with both parts of the world. The slaves had finally gained their freedom.